when it comes to making great looking videos with a smartphone, many people don't even start making videos using their iPhone because they think they have to have a 3-axis gimbal or add-on lenses or filters and so on. And actually this couldn't be further from the truth. The iPhones that we carry in our pockets these days, they are capable of shooting absolutely amazing videos. The video that you saw in the beginning of this video was just shot using the iPhone 14 Pro, and it was also edited on the iPhone 14 Pro. There was no gimbal, there was no add-ons, there was nothing at all. And you can do the same thing, and in this video I'll show you how. So before we get started, let's talk about the best settings, or the settings that I'm always using for these kinds of videos. And when it comes to the resolution, I like to shoot these videos in 4K. By default, your iPhone is set to only 1080p, so definitely make sure to bump that up to 4K, because then you will just have more pixels, more resolution, and in the end also just a sharper image. And next to that you have a number, usually that's 24, 30 or 60, and this is your frame rate, and this basically determines like how many individual frames are captured each second. And I like to shoot these B-roll videos at 60 frames per second. The reason for that is then I have the flexibility in the post-production to slow my clips down, but also to speed them up. So 4K 60 frames, these are the settings that I'm using. Another thing that is very important that I can give you on the way: whenever you're filming, make sure that you lock your focus and the exposure. And you can do this on iPhones by just long pressing on the screen. So as you can see, it now says AE and AF locked. And if I now tilt up to the sky, it's not changing. If I deactivate this, let's see, if I tilt up to the sky, then it's getting darker and then it's getting brighter. And also the white balance is changing. So whenever you're filming outside, always make sure that you lock your focus and the exposure and shoot in 4K at 60 frames per second. I also like to turn on the grid. You can activate this by going into your settings, camera, and then turn on the grid. And this is just very helpful for framing your shots. Another thing that's also very important to make your videos look more cinematic and overall more professional is to add movement to your shots. And ideally, best case is that you would have something like a 3-axis gimbal, because this basically, stabilizes and smoothes out all your imperfections when you're walking. However, the stabilization of our iPhones these days is already freaking good, so you can get away in most scenarios just shooting handheld. And another tip that I have for you to make the shots look even smoother than they actually are is to use the ultra wide angle lens, because then your imperfections will just be less noticeable compared to shooting with the 2x or the 3x lens. So when it comes to adding handheld movement that looks smooth, I would always recommend that you grab your smartphone with both hands, make sure that you have a nice grip, and then make sure that you're not doing too much with your hands, but instead move your entire body so that your hands basically stay in the same position as always. And another thing that's also very important, make sure that you add depth to your image, or that you have some kind of foreground, because then the movement will just be way more noticeable. But now let's do the exact same shot, but let's move closer to this tree right here, because then we just have a much more dynamic image and it will just look so much better. We're doing that a couple of times just to make sure that we get the shot perfect. One thing to make your videos look more stunning and more cinematic and more, more visually appealing to the viewer is to add transitions to your shots. And you could of course do them within the post-production by just adding a zoom in or a swirl to the left or something like this, but you can also do them in camera with your iPhone. And I will share now my favorite transition, and this is called the whip pan transition. And basically the way and how this works is you again lock your focus and the exposure, then you capture a shot like something like this maybe. You could add some movement, and then you end the shot by whipping to the right, for example. And then you start the second shot just as you ended the first one. So in this case, again, with a whip to the right. As I was walking through the woods, I have already captured the first shot, which I ended by whipping down. So now the only thing left is to make a second shot where I'm starting off with a whip down. So I'll just do that right now. So as you can see, I'm starting off with a very fast whip down, and then I'm slowly moving to the left. And this is how it looks. And then in the post-production, we'll just cut them together and we'll have a seamless transition. So one of the most important things to make your videos look more cinematic is, first of all, add some movement to your shots, and secondly is to create some depth in your image. And creating a shallow depth of field and overall depth in your image with an iPhone is a bit more complicated and a bit more difficult compared to how it is on a DSLR with a full frame sensor. The reason for that is quite simple. The sensors on smartphones are super tiny, but if you move closer towards your object, you can still create a very nice and shallow depth of field and overall a nice and more cinematic looking image. And I'll show you how that works with, with this tree here, for example. So what you can see right now, this is also what I can see with my own eyes. And this tree is not looking like spectacular at all. And it's nothing special. But if we move way closer, set our focus and the exposure, hit record button, lock it, and now add tiny bits of movement. And now if we also add some color grading, this is definitely something that you can always remember when you're filming with your iPhone. Make sure that you move closer to your objects, because then you just have a natural shallow depth of field and your videos will just look so much more cinematic compared to being far away. So what about the most beautiful time for making your videos? For me personally, my absolute favorite time of capturing a video is during golden hour, which is just after sunrise and just before sunset. So when I started making this video, it was a pretty overcast day and I did not expect that the sun came out. It did come out, so I had to retake a couple of shots, but just so that you know, filming during golden hour will bring the best results possible. And filming during an overcast day is also very beautiful, because then you barely have any shadows at all. This is also very flattering for human faces. So in the end, there is no right weather or wrong weather or right time or wrong time. You just have to adapt to the circumstances. And to make this video look a bit more interesting for the viewer, I'm also going to introduce a character to this sequence, and since I'm alone out here, I'll just use myself. I know it's very tempting to use the front camera whenever you're filming yourself, but I would still recommend that you're using the back camera because the quality is just way better. I have already captured a shot where I'm looking towards the trees, and I will basically try to mimic that so that it looks like I'm looking at the trees. So this is the goal. Let's see how it works. Whenever you're filming yourself, always make sure to double check your shot after you're done shooting, because you haven't seen yourself and you're not sure whether the framing was correct and so on. So always double check the shot. So with the next shot, I want to do something that is called a rack focus. And basically the idea is to start off at an object where you're pretty close at, so that you have the shallow depth of field and so on. Then I will move around just a tiny bit. I'll just basically move from the left to the right. And then whilst I'm doing this, I will also change my focus to focus to the distance. As you can see in the distance here, we have a church and a couple of houses. And here in the foreground, we have this tree. And the goal is to start off like this. So maybe something like this, and then tilt over there and change the focus. So this will be the goal. Let's see how this goes. So if you're shooting with the native app of your iPhone, you will not only have a change of the focus, but also of the exposure. In case you just want to get a rack focus without the change of the exposure, you would have to use a more professional app like Filmic Pro or the Beastcam app, for example. In this video, I just wanted to show you what you can do with just your phone with the native app and nothing else. But if you wanted to step it up a notch, then this would be the way to go. So one thing that is of course very important to get a video that looks as good as it did in the end is to edit your video properly. And editing is also not as hard as you might think. As you have seen throughout this video, the shooting process was actually pretty straightforward and not as hard as you might think, and so is the editing. We cannot cover the entire editing process in this video, as this video then would be half an hour long and this would not be good for the YouTube algorithm, but we have recorded the entire editing process. In case you're interested in seeing how I edited this video and also how I color graded it and so on, because this does make a very big difference, and also adding the CinemaScopes and so on, there are a few small things that make a big difference in the end. In case you're interested in seeing how I was editing this video, then click the first link below, that like button. There you can sign up to our pre-launch list, because we're just about to launch a CapCut Masterclass. This is a free software that works on iPhones, on Android phones, and also on computers. And I have documented the entire editing process, and I will release that video inside of this Masterclass. In the meantime, if you would like to learn more about the editing app CapCut, then click this video over here.